to Matthew chapter 16, or thumb your way there if you're on your phone or something like that. Want you to be able to turn there or get there on your phone, because I want you to be able to see Scripture and to come into contact with it and not just hear my words as we go through those kind of things. Reminder again, if it's your first night at the Loft, hey, welcome. I hope you enjoy hanging out with us. Hope you enjoy your small group minister later tonight. We are in a new series called Revolution. Okay, what's interesting to me about New Year's every year, because it's never been this way for me, is people are like, it's a new year, it's a new me. I mean, I've got this list of resolutions. This year, I'm going to work out, right? And no, you're not. No, you're not. Now it's like the cool thing every year, not every year, the last couple of years, Haley has been like, I need a word for this year. I'm like, what does that even mean? We got lots of words. Sentences, books for this year. And she's like, this is my word, right? Like your word may be joy, because that's adorable. And you want joy in 2019, right? 2018 didn't have joy. 2019, joy on the horizon, right? You may have all these goals. This year you're not going to sleep in all your classes. I don't know, right? This year, did everybody just that was rude, man. Somebody all point at that one kid. We know you sleep. Listen, I don't want to set a bad example. Okay. You're like, this year, I'm going to move up in the rankings, the class rank. This year, I'm going to make this team, man. This year, I'm going to talk to a girl. Man, I don't know. But every year when I think about resolutions, and I always thought that they were funny, because when I ran cross country, we didn't get New Year's Day off. And so we would all wake up and we'd go out the next morning, we'd go running, and it was like a whole city had moved into Georgetown, Texas. We're like, where all these people come from? We run all year. Who are you out here? And then January 5th, we'd be like, oh, they're done. They're out. And all of a sudden the park is just empty. There's nobody around. We're like, I think everybody in our town died. This is terrible. And I've always thought that resolutions were interesting. And every year when I kind of think about that, the only thing cooler than starting something new is completely changing a culture. Right? Being able to start a revolution. Being able to change something, to be able to look at something that the majority believes or that exists within the majority and going, you know what? There's a small group of people that believe something different, and we're going to do something about it. There's something just interesting about even being a part of that. And so I began to think back on my life as I was like, man, what's a revolution that I've been a part of? Right? Did I just change the lunch menu in my high school, and that it was more mozzarella sticks? Because that was my primary diet, just mozzarella sticks in high school. It was dope. It made me really slow, but it was awesome. And I began to think back on it, and it wasn't a part of a lot of culture shifts or changes or movements or anything like that. But I began to think back to third grade, because third grade was when the ultimate rebellion began within me. And in third grade, my dad would drive me and my little sister to elementary school. She was in kindergarten, and we went to school together. And she's here tonight. She still looks like she's in kindergarten, but don't worry about it. I'm kidding. I love you. You're 22. You're getting married this year. It's a big day. Okay. That was a shot, because she'll be the really short person walking around later, and you'll understand my joke. It'll be awesome. So we'd drive to school with my dad, and my dad really loved country music. Right? If you know anything about me, if you've been here long enough, you're like, Lane doesn't seem like I don't wear boots ever. At all in life, except for when you're a kid and you want to be just like your dad, and you're this tall and you put on the boots and they go up to your chest, and you're like, there's 3 or 4 of those pictures out there. But now when I get to choose my own shoes, no boots, okay? And my dad would drive us to school every day, and there was an album that came out in 2002 by Kenny Chesney. Okay, and some of you are just old enough to have maybe heard your parents hear it, and the album was called No Shoes, No Shirt, No Problems. And I had to think really hard. I had to go back, because I was like, man, I remember this one song. And so I had to find out what the album was, and I began to listen to the album in my office this week, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm 26 years old. I still know every word to every song on this CD. That's how emotionally scarred I am. That's how deep, it is deeply ingrained, more than Scripture. And so I'm like, man. And so I began to think, and just so you can get a grasp, here's a quick clip of a song off that album. I'm immediately getting depressed. I got to call home, make sure my dog didn't die.
Well, me and my lady had our first big fight.
Oh, so of course. How? Okay. All right, cut it. That makes me sick. That's why I like to call Haley when we get in a fight. I'm like, this is my lady. the fight's over. And so is our marriage. I don't know, but there's that. And then 2 years later, another album came out, a fantastic album, not by Kenny Chesney. Here is a quick, oh man, that coffee's getting to me. I'm dehydrated. Here's a quick clip from that album. Come here, I want to punch you in the face right now. Woo, man, my heart rate starts getting, that's what I was to before I preach. I'm like, let's go kill Satan. Okay. That album is Under Oath. It's the greatest band of all time. Unfortunately, Under Oath doesn't make a good baby name, so you can't go with that. But then that album came out in 2004 when I was in 5th grade. That was kind of the beginning. You're like, 5th graders listen to that? Yes, rebel. And so that album comes out, and it's like the first CD I could buy with my own money. However, I got money. I don't know if I stole it from another 5th grader. I don't know what I did, but I got it, and I bought that CD. And for me, that was my revolution, okay? Because it changed the systems and the structures of my household. Because there used to be in my household this big CD player. There's the round things that you put into things. It doesn't all come digital. And we'd go and we could listen all to the same music in the same house. And it was great. And there was peace and harmony. And then my preteen angst started to creep up, and I was like, I want to hit something. And so I discovered hardcore music, and I would listen to it in my bedroom, turn it all the way up, and all the peace and harmony died, and all of a sudden I've got a mom in the living room hey, turn that mess down! I'm like, Mom, it's metal. She's like, Lane, you're moving out. That was that literally changed my future. To be able to discover my own music, to know that there was different music out there besides me and my lady, right? No metal or hardcore song ever has referred to a woman as my lady. It just never happened, and it was just, it was so good. It was this new thing because Mom and Dad hated it, which means I loved it, right? I discovered it, and it changed things for me. And we look back, and there are much more important revolutions throughout history, right? Not just the uprising of screaming people that are angry with their parents, right? But we look back even in our nation's history. There's this little thing, I don't know if you've heard about it, history class, American Revolution, right? We're like, you know what? The British people, we're kind of done with them. Let's go. Let's be our own people. Let's do our own thing. Let's dump all their tea into the water. We keep looking back in history. We see this incredible moment. It'd be awesome to be there when Martin Luther King Jr. gives this incredible speech, more eloquent than I will ever be able to deliver, no screamo music involved, this I Have a Dream speech, where he says, you know what, even bigger than there just not being slavery, is that all people are created equal. And there's this minority of us that we believe that all people are created equal, and so we're going to move with that. It's this revolution within culture, within systems, within structures. There's something exciting about being a part of that you might be a part of something that brings a difference to something that changes the minds and everything around you. And when we think about Christianity, here's what we don't normally think about. We don't think yes, it's a revolution, a hardcore revolution for Jesus, right? We don't really think about that. We're like, Christianity, that's the thing. That happens up there where I play boxes sometimes. It's pretty okay most of the time, as long as the shirts are good enough, right? We kind of think about Christianity in that way. We don't really think about the way that it changes systems and structures and governments and history and how it's long-standing across over 2,000 years. We don't usually think about it that way. And so we can begin to get bored because we're like, well, Christianity is just like cute little devotionals and Hobby Lobby signs. And so we want to go back into Scripture tonight in Matthew chapter 16 and see, well, how did it start out? Because I think that it was more than that. It had to have been. Nothing that soft can withstand the test of time. And what we're going to find is that Christianity, even today, looks a lot more like a revolution. It's just that you and I are comfortable. And we've forgotten some basic tenets that are so earth-shattering, and sometimes we can speak them and go, oh yeah, I get that. But it changes everything. I mean, literally everything. Well, I know. She already hates my preaching. It's good, man. In the midst of that, man, here's what we need to know. When we choose to follow Jesus, we get to be a part of a revolution. And no one communicates that, but what we do here week in and week out, what we study here, when we worship together, when we come together, we're a small minority of people that believe something that is so different than the rest of culture, and it matters. And it can change everything around us and everyone around us. But until we believe that, it doesn't matter. Until we buy in, the gospel does not move. Or it moves without us, and we miss it. When you look into Matthew chapter 16, we see this moment, like all good revolutions, starts with a conversation. Right? Can you imagine sitting around the table with MLK and him being like, you know what, I'm going to just march some steps and give some speeches. And you're like, dude, chill, like calm down. Ain't nobody going to listen to you. Can you imagine just having been there for some of the greatest conversations in history that they were like, you know what, I think that we can do this. And we enter into this conversation with Jesus and his disciples. It's just him and his 12 bros just hanging out. And we're going to look at Peter really. Peter's like captain of the team, man. Like Jesus is over, and Peter is like the most vocal, dumbest, but somehow most brilliant one out of all of them. He always speaks before he thinks. He always acts before he thinks. It just kind of like comes out of him, right? Like you have that one friend that you're like, oh man, right? Like when I was in Graham, Texas, we went on a mission trip to Tennessee, and we're standing around this bucket. We're painting this cabin, and in this bucket are all these paintbrushes, and it was filled with red paint, and so it looked like this red like fruit punch in the trash can. Right, and so jokingly, because I will often speak out of turn, if you didn't know that. And I jokingly am like, yeah, man, I'll give like $20 to someone who drinks that. And without thinking, one of my seniors goes over to a trash can and grabs a cup out of it that probably had a paintbrush in it before that, and just grabs it, walks up, fills it up, chugs the whole thing in like 3 seconds flat. And I remember looking at him and going, you're going to die today. Like, I'm glad you're saved, kid. Like, just think, move, act before anything. I mean, that's who Peter is. Sometimes it ends up really good. Sometimes it ends up not so good. And in this moment, it actually ends up changing the course of everything. And in chapter 16 and verse 13, we enter into this conversation. It says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, verse 13, he asked his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? Son of Man referring to himself. He asks, what's the rumor mill? Who do people say that I am? And they go, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. The rumor going around is that Jesus is basically one of these really dead, famous prophets, like reincarnate. They were like, I think Jeremiah is back from all those hundreds of years ago. And we can look at that and we go, dumb idiots, that's not who Jesus is. But it's really a compliment amongst the people, right? Like that they held him in such high regard that he's got to be one of these other dudes that we held in high regard. He's got to be one of them. He has to be them. And then Jesus looks at his disciples and he goes, but you, who do you say that I am? And then Simon Peter answered. Can you imagine being able to hear that? Who do you guys say that I am? You know what small groups are like, right? You're sitting there and your leader looks at you and goes, so what do you think of Jesus? And everyone in the room is like, somebody please, for the love, answer. And all of you have answers in your head and you're just like, silence, right? Can you imagine sitting in Jesus' small group? And he goes, and who do you say that I am? And everyone's sitting there like, because you have that one person in your group too, please, Peter, please. Peter, speak up! And Peter answers in. He comes in for the team. And he goes, Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And then he gets that moment that we all dream of our small group minister leaning into us, right? That assurance. Good answer, right? Even if you're like, you are a cat, right? We're like, good try, right? No, he says, this great answer, and Jesus responded, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, meaning nobody told this to you or made this true to you. My Father in heaven revealed it to you. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. We're going to talk about that at the end of the series. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth, you will have loosed in heaven. And then he gave his disciples the order tell no one that he was the Messiah. Now, that's a weird way for Jesus to end that for sure, and there's some reasons in there. But what we see is this. When Jesus goes, who do you say that I am? Peter goes, Jesus, you're God. Of everything that I've seen, of all the miracles that I've seen, and shortly after this, Peter is going to be taken into the most incredible moment in Scripture. In chapter 17, the Transfiguration, like one of the most, like if CGI was invented, he would have had to believe it was CGI because Jesus is on this mountaintop and God is over them, and all of a sudden there's Moses standing there, and they're like, Moses, that dude is super dead. Where did he come from? And Peter witnesses all this, and this is even before that. And Peter looks and he goes, Jesus, you're God. And that's a big deal because literally where they're standing, within 10 miles of them, there's at least a dozen temples dedicated to gods that are not God. And so they're in the midst of an entire culture that says, no, this is a God over here, and this is a God over here, this is a God over here. Well, no, sex is God. Well, sports is God. No, relationships are God. Acceptance, that's God. Popularity, that's God. Fame, that's God. And then not only that, they're Jewish dudes who for the entirety of history have been God's chosen people, and now they're saying the God that our people knew is standing right in front of us. And you and I, we forget the weight of that because we hear about Jesus in all these ways, and we forget he's God. He's not angel, he's not angelic, he's not good teacher, he's not hip dude with good ideas, he's not really nice guy, he's not baby in manger, dude on cross, guy out of the grave. He is God. And that changes everything, and it changed everything for them. And what we got to understand is Peter utters something that he has no idea the ramifications of. He has no idea what it's going to mean for Jesus to be God. He has no comprehension that Jesus is going to die. Actually, in the next passage, Jesus begins to talk about how he's going to die and come back again. And Peter is like, whoa, no, Jesus, we would never let that happen. And Jesus, like a really good friend, goes, Satan, get behind me. And you're like, whoa, 2 seconds ago, Peter's the beginning of the revolution. Now he's Satan? Jesus, why would you say such a thing to him? Because Peter speaks before he thinks, for sure. Because he has no idea what it's going to mean when he says, man, Jesus, you're God. But it's going to change Peter's life because Peter's going to spend the rest of his life trying to convince everybody else, or at least communicate the gospel, that Jesus is God. Because he wants everybody else to know that Jesus is God because of this moment where he utters to Jesus, not just that you are God, but you are my God. And not just that you are God, that you are king. When everybody else thinks they're kings of the land, you're king of all the lands. That changes everything. All of Christianity hinges on if Jesus is God. When we look at the death and the resurrection, I know, right up here. When we look at the death and resurrection of Jesus, it only matters if Jesus is God. If Jesus is not God, the death and resurrection is a really good magic trick. But if he is, it is the salvation for all mankind, because only God can forgive sins. They knew that. In all the moments where Jesus says that he forgives sins, the people are appalled because you know what they know? Only God can forgive sins. If Jesus is God, only he can forgive sins, only he can die for those sins, and only he can come back from the dead, that you and I would be forgiven of sin when we put our faith in him. But when we do that, we're not just getting a get-out-of-hell-free card. We're not just getting a finally I'm a good person card. We're not getting those. The point of Christianity is not to be a good person, it's to be a part of the revolution. To be a part of the church that Peter is at the very forefront of. To be a part of the community of believers that were so crazy that they would look at Jesus and go, that's God. Whatever you think God is, Jesus is it. Or whoever you think Jesus is, he's God. And anything else is not Christianity. It changes everything, and it's what the entire movement of the church and of Christianity hinges on. This moment. It stands on it. That has to wake us up inside. It has to change you and me so it can change cultures, systems, structures. Do you know what claiming Jesus to be God and King did to all the governments of that day? You think all the local kings got together and were like, dude, there's this other dude claiming to be king. That's cool. No. You think it was cool with an entire history of Judaism? They said, man, this guy standing in front of us is God, even though we thought that he would look like something else, but he looks like Jesus. No. For a whole group, for a whole sect of people, it was about following rules to be in a relationship with God. It was about following the law. And this is, no, it's about following Jesus. And yeah, he's going to call you to live a certain way. But he's going to do it through forgiving your sin, not working your way out of it. Turned entire systems on its head. It turns our entire system on its head. When everything in us wants to hold sin over other people's heads, the gospel in us requires us to forgive them, that they might know Jesus. When everything in us wants to build our own kingdoms, the gospel in us reminds us that we're here to build God's kingdom. When everything in us wants to separate other people from us, the gospel in us requires us to draw people to us through relationship. It's completely opposite of all of the entire rest of culture of the world, where everything in us wants to chase our own desires and satisfy ourselves. The gospel calls us to be satisfied in God. It's crazy revolution. When I was in Graham, there was this group of middle school girls. And some of y'all have some groups like this, right? They're like, we know there are just some groups within our youth ministry that they just like come in by storm. Like if they're gone, there's 20 of us. If there's here, there's like 1,700 of us, right? And these little middle school girls would come into our building every night, and they'd like come in sweaty from like their little middle school girl basketball practice where they made 3 layups or whatever it was. And they'd come in and they'd be like, hey, Lane. And I was like, I'm not even gonna take the time to remember all your names. There's so many of you. What's up, squad? And they like hung out like a banner over their lives. They were like, we're squad. And they would come in, and only one of them like knew Jesus. Only one of them really wanted to know who Jesus is. Only one of them cared. And that one, man, she brought her whole group in with her. She was like, this is Ashton, this is Karen, this is, I don't remember, this is a million of them. And she would come, oh, you got to be here, you got to be here. They're like, why? That dude's awful, he sucks. They're like, well, come anyway. And throughout 2.5 years, we would kind of see a little bit at a time, one of them accept Christ. We'd see him get it. And at the end of 2.5 years, we're sitting at camp, and there's one girl there that's like we'd been praying for, because we're like, dude, it's like she's so close. Like I think she might know Jesus, and she doesn't know it. Like she's that close. Like she would sit in our room and be like scribbling notes. We're like, who scribbles notes but doesn't? What? Like, I mean, she was just learning. She was like, I mean, who is God? What are the answers? I need to know who Jesus is. I mean, she just was compiling information. And we're sitting at camp, and there's this moment, and there's one of those like, hey, if you want to stand up to accept Christ, you can do that now. And me and my intern were standing in the back, and this girl at that time was in like 8th grade, and she stands up, and I remember we were just like, finally. It was like all the energy of our lives, all of the sweat, all of the anxiety of like, man, we just want to see this girl know Jesus because she's got to be this close. Make a profession much like Peter's that says, for all this time, I've learned a lot about Jesus. I've seen him do a lot of things. I've seen him do it in my friends. I've seen him do it in this group. I've seen all of this. But today, I have confidence that Jesus is God, and I have no idea what that's going to mean for my future. But I know that he's God, and so I'm going to follow him. Because if anybody is worth following, it's got to be God. I say that because a lot of us come to church. A lot of us were born in Christian families. A lot of us are generally good people, for whatever definition that is. But until we have this moment like Peter, and God is there, Jesus is there, and he says, who do you say that I am? And until we look right back, we go, Jesus, you're God. You're my God. And because you went to the cross, and because you rose again, because you want to be in a relationship with me, I'm going to follow you. And I have no idea what that's going to mean. I have no idea. but I know that you're God and I'm not. And so I'm going to follow you. And we get to be a part of this thing called the church. We get to be a part of the revolution. We get to be a part of like this little 8th grade girl is the only one that knows Jesus, and all of her friends, of other people learning that Jesus is God. Man, if we know that Jesus is God, we got to talk about it. Like you don't find out that kind of information. You don't hold that information to yourself and you go, yeah, I know, but they don't know. Sucks to suck. Like, we can't be that. When you find out that Jesus is God and it changes that much, then it's got to change everything else. We can't have these moments where we go, yeah, I love Jesus, but this. I love this other thing. That's not Jesus is God. That's like cute little Jesus on your nightstand. That's like fortune cookie Jesus. That's not who he is. When we get that he's God, it reignites a revolution. It changes systems, structures, communities, including ours.